I'm Elijah, and I'm a gamer. Game companies profit off us. Everybody gets something new. Except for me, because I like old shit like new shit. Picture this. You want to play Mega Man X on the Super Nintendo, but you don't have a Super Nintendo and you don't want to emulate it. I never said it had to be ideal.
Guys, I am the prime demographic for a mini console. Yeah, that all checks out. A mini console is just as the name implies. Bite-sized replicas of actual game consoles from yesteryear that plays a handful of games of their respected library. They come in pristine condition, made with love half the time, and they make cool gift ideas for those who have high standards. Now, why would you get these instead of the actual consoles? Well, I can think of a few reasons, but that's beside the point. Retro gaming has always been a niche market for not being a thing born since, yesterday. It's been an actual part of gaming since the 8-bit generation. You could chalk up reselling old-ass arcade games on the Atari 2600, NES, and Super Nintendo, backwards compatibility for games being a thing in most consoles until now. However, things didn't go big until the 2000s hit. Jack Specific made some arcade and Atari plug-and-plays, the Nintendo Wii and the Virtual Console allowing you to play old games from the 80s and 90s, Xbox Live Arcade housing a few games that people actually gave a shit about, and companies like Sega and Capcom putting their old games into game compilations on new systems. That was it in terms of the early to late 2000s. When we make it to the 2010s,
my new thing can't play WarioWare.
but the retro gaming market wasn't the same as it was in the early 2000s, with not many caring or giving a shit about Punch-Out. You're telling me that my 3DS could play Punch-Out, but not any of the GBA titles? Really, we weren't offered that much variety back then. We were given the same 8-bit games we played back in the early 2000s. Many saw repetitive and stale. Like, give us something new, damn it. I think the thought process that Nintendo had was, why would they play it on their new console when they could play it on the old console? Thus, in 2016, Nintendo rejuvenated the 8-bit games with the NES Classic Edition. You know what that means? I can finally give a shit about Punch-Out again! So the NES Classic comes in this piece of plastic, a buyer's impulse at best. It is also said that it's filled to the brim with 30 great Nintendo games, which I refer to as Mega Man 2 and whatever Nintendo felt like doing that morning. There are also 4 save states for games that maybe saving is a good idea before you die, but in all seriousness, it's actually a good piece of plastic, and it gives you a good chunk of the NES library. Except for the controllers, it really hurts my feelings. I mean, I don't flat out hate the thing. I enjoy the pain I get for playing with it. It's just now it's the same uncomfortable controller, but with a short wire. Now I could indulge in an extension cord, but really? Do I have to pay a few extra dollars for a longer wire? But whatever. The NES Classic did well, with 2016 being a pulverizing year for Nintendo to say the least. They really needed this victory to make success. Now, how do I know it actually succeeded? Because there were scalpers, making it hard for people to buy these paperweights of limited supply.
I know you're expecting a joke here, but no. Nintendo really did say, F it, 3's enough. But who knows, 2017 was Nintendo's year. The Switch got released, there were a few key titles coming out, and behold, the Super Nintendo Classic Edition. And it's the f***ing scalpers again!
To be honest, the thing is actually pretty cool. It's the same thing as before, but 2 longer controllers instead of 1 short controller, and it actually has the advantage of playing SNES games. It is a Super Nintendo Mini after all. You get 20 Super Nintendo games and the exclusive, first and only release of Star Fox 2. Jesus. You also can rewind your games to fix your mistakes, colorful borders to cure your black bar-itis. It almost has everything. All it was missing was the ability to tell you that you are worth a damn for buying it.
We were so close to the perfect product.
Okay, we are 0 for 2 in retro gaming. So, what's next in 2018?
At this point, this list speaks for itself.
A couple of companies tried to do the retro craze, but failed. The C64 Mini, it's a mini keyboard. That's cool. It doesn't work, and you have to use a digital on-screen keyboard. That's cool. Also, the game selection is weird, as there's really nothing of note here. But I mean, it is Commodore, so... The Neo Geo Mini, it looks like a mini arcade cabinet that plugged into the TV. However, the games don't look good. They even took the original button layout and changed it. However, the big release that year was the PlayStation Classic. Yeah, this is bad.
There's no point in me giving it a chance, so I'll just give it a chance right here.
The build quality's alright. It looks like a miniature PlayStation with the vents on the side actually working. And the controls feeling nice, and it's all the positivity I'm going to get from this. As for the negativity... Okay, first off, the controller's outdated. The asking price was expensive at $100, where the Super Nintendo Mini was $20 cheaper, and how are the games on the PlayStation 1 Classic? Even as someone who has never played PlayStation 1, most of these games don't follow under the phrase PlayStation and Classic. Sure, you got some notable games like Metal Gear Solid, Resident Evil, and Rayman, but that's all I see for PlayStation Classic, which is probably why that the PlayStation has a niche audience. When you look at Nintendo owners, they would probably say that they play mostly Mario, Zelda, Metroid, all that. Putting 5 PS1 owners in a room is guaranteed that they play different games. Also, half of the games on this thing run the PAL version, which means most of the games here will look like a slideshow compared to the NTSC versions.
So yeah, most of these mini consoles from 2018 weren't as good as the NES or SNES Classic in terms of game quality and game selection. But there was one company that kept behind but still did well.
At Games is a company known for their Atari and Sega plug-and-plays, though they aren't making Sega consoles anymore. Their Atari systems are alright, but I mean, it's Atari. Anybody can say anything about them. Also, it could be just me, but some of them aren't running the Atari versions of these games, half the time will which be disappointing. Now, Sega has an interesting things with mini consoles, as they started all the way back in the early 2000s, okay, they partnered with At Games in the 2010s, oh fuck, then they proceed to cut ties with At Games to make their own mini console in 2019. Okay, this thing is a great return to form and shows what Sega was really about in the 90s. The build quality was alright, the controls feel good, and the games are a good representation of the Genesis library. Got some classic Disney games, games that wouldn't release via cartridge in the US like Mega Man The Wily Wars. This is buyer's impulse that I'm glad at buying. It seems I have left an impression on you on picking these things up. However, there are a few problems. Like for example, I never play with these things. I mean, I don't really keep them plugged in for safety reasons, and it really clutters to say the least. Whenever I look at my search protector, I fucking run. Another problem I have is the game list. Many of these games are fine and play alright most of the time, but many consoles don't really give you that much. Sure, there's enough to keep you going, but then you realize that there's a few key titles missing. Like on the Nintendo Classic Edition, why is there only Super C in here and not Contra? The Super Nintendo Mini, it has Donkey Kong Country 1, but not Donkey Kong Country 2 or 3. PlayStation Classic? Go to the corner. I mean, sure, there may be some legal reasons, except I did something that's probably gonna put me in jail.
This is my personal reason on why I pick these things up and why I use them. So if you're gonna do this, it's gonna involve a little, piracy. Ah, damn it, not again!
I get to play most of the games I want to play on these things, and have actually beaten a few titles here. But then that begs the question, why play on these things than on your no-nonsense new consoles? And I would answer that, but that deserves a discussion for its own video. So emulation is how I'm able to play these games. But we could go further, right? Modern mini consoles. Now when I say that, I mean the N64, Sega Saturn, and Dreamcast. If I'm ever gonna play Sonic R, I won't. But even if I was, I still wouldn't. My Sega Saturn Mini won't have the same power of the actual console or emulate on my computer. Yeah, the hardware I use isn't really ideal and doesn't give the same horsepower as the official ones, making me play some games on an emulator on a computer, if I was a pussy.
Mini consoles are an understandable concept that I can enjoy. They help us to play, appreciate, preserve, and despise old games from the past. Though they bring up a debate whether it's better to emulate or play the games on original hardware. I find these things in the emulation department, and it's okay. It's a mini representation of their old counterparts, while it's also preserving their legacy. For anybody getting into gaming's past and don't want to buy the original hardware or emulate it, yeah, piracy. I should keep my mouth shut.